So let's dive into making this bread, and I'm going to show you how simple it is. It's called the 1.5 hour honey wheat bread.
Welcome to Ridgehaven Homestead. From the mountains of Upper East Tennessee, we share snippets of our off-grid life, cabin build, and garden blessings. Pour yourself a cup of tea, sit back, and take a peek into our off-grid home and family.
Welcome back to my kitchen. I am really excited today. We are making bread, and it's a crazy thing, but a true confession all the same. I am terrible at making bread. I'm a homesteader. We live off grid, but I've failed at bread so many times because I've just gotten out of practice. Probably 10 years ago, I was making bread all the time, and then we took a gluten-free break, and I'm trying to get back into it. My last attempts at making bread over the last several months have been so heavy, terrible. And so I was super excited last night to try a recipe that I actually have never tried before. I came across a cooking school that I had attended probably 15 years ago, and they had a recipe for bread, and so I decided, hey, I'll try it. And so my bread has come out really nice and light. It's not 100% whole wheat, but that's okay. I'm giving myself some grace because we just want a bread that is edible. So let's dive into making this bread, and I'm going to show you how simple it is. It's called the 1.5 hour honey wheat bread, Kathy Nomura, and this recipe is a little bit dear to my heart because Kathy is a wonderful person, and she did this cooking class when my kids were really little, and it was so amazing. And I kept that recipe booklet all these years. And so now she is suffering from the same disease that my dad suffered from, Lewy body dementia. And it's taking a lot of the things away from her, but it did not take, and it cannot take away her recipes that she has perfected over the years. And so I feel like this is a tribute to her and her wonderful cooking and baking skills, because I feel like that will live on as a legacy. Let's get started.
I will tell you a little secret that you probably know if you have a Bosch blender or a Bosch mixer, but in case you didn't know, if you're new to it, a lot of times when I make bread, especially if I'm making a large load of bread, the dough gets caught in this part here, and then it gets all gunked up, and when you go to wash it, it gets really gunky. Well, you can take this center post out with screws. There are screws on the bottom. It does take like a special star screwdriver bit, but then you can put them back in. You can get it all cleaned out, and you won't be rinsing forever because that dough gets gunked up in there. It's really hard to get out unless you go ahead and remove this. So I'm going to put it back together because I washed it earlier from my last night's bread baking, and so now we have a nice clean Bosch bowl that I just have to finish screwing together. Here's that star bit wherever you are. Can you see it?
To make our 1.5 hour bread, we first are going to, let's go over the ingredients and then we'll go step by step. We store our flour in 5-gallon buckets in the pantry, and so I am going to be using a mixture of whole wheat flour and all-purpose flour today. So I have already measured out 8 cups of sifted all-purpose flour. I sifted that prior to the video because I didn't want all the flour puffing up everywhere. And then we also have this whole wheat flour we'll be using. Okay, we are going to be using dry yeast, gluten flour. It's sometimes called vital wheat gluten. It's all the same thing. Salt, oil. We have sunflower oil and honey. And there's one other ingredient that the recipe calls for that I did not have, and that is dough conditioner. This recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of dough enhancer, and I've never used that. I don't know what it is. I will be checking in to see what it is, and I might try it in a future recipe, but I think that's less important on this recipe because I am doing it half and half. If we are doing like a completely all whole wheat flour, then that's where those dough enhancers really come in handy, because it's sometimes hard to get a good rise on whole wheat flour. I've done it before, and I will say one principle of doing whole wheat flour, it works best when you have freshly ground wheat berries. And so I will be getting back into that soon. I do have some wheat berries. I don't have any ground for this recipe, and so I'm actually trying to use up the flour that I have stored because I don't want it to go to waste. But I think that you can make a really nice whole wheat flour from either a part Montana wheat, the hard red, or a Prairie Gold. Sometimes I like a mixture. It makes a really delicious loaf. But that's a recipe for another day. And so because I do not have the dough conditioner, it also said you can use a half a teaspoon of vitamin C powder. So the vitamin C powder that I'm using is actually some liposomal vitamin C, and that's what I used last night, and it worked very nicely. We want to start out by putting 6 cups of warm water into our Bosch mixing bowl. And we also want to make sure that we have our dough hook. So I'm placing my dough hook in here, getting it seated nicely, and then I just use warm water from the tap. Okay, there's our 6 cups of water. Next, we are going to be adding a heaping tablespoon of salt. This happens to be the Himalayan pink salt. It's what I usually use. So a heaping tablespoon. Next, we want to add 1/3 to 1 cup each of oil and honey. And I went ahead and added the 1/2 cup of each. And it didn't come out too sweet. Okay. If you add your oil first, then you can add your honey and it'll slip right out of your measuring cup. Get every bit of that. It's good stuff. Okay, next we want to add if you're using dough enhancer, now's the time to add 2 tablespoons of dough enhancer, or we can add I think I misspoke. I said a half a teaspoon. It's actually 1/4 of a teaspoon of vitamin C powder, or 1,000 milligrams. Let me check how much this is. 2 capsules of this contains 1,700 milligrams. So I need to use 1 and then just another partial. Put the rest back for later. I can smell the honey. I'm using the wrong lid. Okay, use the right lid there. I'm going to add the yeast after. I'm going to go ahead and add 13 to 16 cups of freshly milled flour. So all ingredients in 10 cups of flour is what I'm adding to start out with, and then we're going to have the other 3 to 6 cups to play around with. I'm going to start with 5 of each. Okay, making bread is not an exact science because it just seems like you always have to fiddle with the ingredient. You have to play around with the ingredients every single time because just different things are going to factor into how the bread turns out. So we have 5 of whole wheat, and I want to just give that a little stir. Mix that a little bit, and then we're going to add 5 of our all-purpose flour.
Once you get your 10 cups of flour in, you're going to go ahead and put that on the Bosch mixer and start your mixing. You can mix it at 1 to incorporate the ingredients and then turn it up to 2 while it kneads.
While my dough is mixing, and I'm going to do 6 to 8 minutes on number 2 speed, I'm going to go ahead and grease my pans. Now, the recommended pans for this are 7 junior loaf pans. I don't have any junior loaf pans, but last night when I made the bread, I used this little bitty Pyrex dish, this medium Pyrex loaf pan, And then I use these 3 Lodge cast iron baking pans. These really are my favorites, but I only have 3.
As I'm watching my dough, I realize that I need more flour, so I am going to add a little bit of each kind of flour to try to balance out the dough.
You can see how it's starting to pull away and clean the sides. You want to knead this until it is, when you pull at it, it's very stretchy. Now this still needs a little bit more flour, so I'm going to add another cup and I'm going to keep on. When you pull it, it should be stretchy and not break easily. And then when it gets to that point, then you want to do it for another 1 or 2 minutes on number 3 speed. Okay, this is about 15.5 cups, and I'm going to stop there and just let it keep mixing. If you can hear that speeding up, slowing down noise that the mixer is making, that is what it needs to be doing. Let it do that for a couple minutes and then test your elasticity. And then once it's good and elastic, then like I said, run it at 3 for 1 minute. It's at this point in the bread making journey that I realized, because I was filming, that I completely forgot to add the gluten flour. This makes a huge difference when you're making mostly whole wheat bread. So we're going to go ahead and add a 1/2 cup. It's best if you can go ahead and add it right when you add your other flours, but I completely forgot. Adding your gluten flour really helps to make your bread more elastic. It increases the protein content of it as well. This is a backwards bread making day. Okay, doke. So I'm going to give this another little while to mix. Once you've kneaded your dough sufficiently, you can turn it out. I like to flour just a little area of my counter to make sure it's all kind of tidy. I put it on a flour covered surface, knead it just a smidgen more so that it's not too sticky, and then shape it into loaves. Once I put the loaves in the pan, I am going to put them into a preheated like 100 to 150 degrees oven and let them double. And because my oven has a pilot, that keeps my oven nice and warm at all times. And so I don't even have to do anything about preheating it. I just keep the pilot on, and then I let it double. And then at that point, once it's doubled, then you want to bake it. You can just turn it right on 350 and bake it. You would think that these loaves would last us, but when because it was so good, we broke out one this morning and used it all at breakfast, between breakfast and making sandwiches for lunch. So it doesn't stick around if your bread is good. And then put it in my loaf pan and shape it a little more. We have way more counter space in here than we did when we were in our camper, but we don't have an abundance still. But I'm super thankful for what we have, because we lived 5.5 years in a camper, and that was tight. And our oven was so small that I didn't bake bread. So this is a real privilege, making bread in a larger oven. It's such a nice thing to be able to do. Now, if you have a space that's warm, like a proofing oven or something, you can use that. And if you have the space and the availability, you can put a towel over yours. But it worked out just fine last night when I just went ahead and put these in the oven as is. No towel over. You let them rise for about 30 minutes and then you turn the oven on, and they were not too crusty. They were really good. My oven is nice and warm, but not hot. And here's the before of this one. That way when we check it, we'll know if it's double. Okay, let's close it up and I'll see you in 30 minutes. I truly believe that the worst part of making bread is the cleanup because of that sticky dough. But while my bread is rising, it's a good time to clean up all this flour and everything, and then I should have a basically clean kitchen by the time the bread is done. It's been at least 30 minutes, and let's check on our bread to see how it's raised. Okay, it has definitely doubled, or maybe more. So it's all looking nice and puffy. It's probably about 1.5 to 2 inches above the line of the pan, so that's what we want. So now we are just going to put it back in here and close it up, and we're going to turn our oven on to 350. And then we're going to bake it for 35 to 40 minutes until it's nice and golden brown, and when you tap the bottom of it, it sounds hollow. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. I already know it's good. I really like it. Very good. The thing I can't decide is if I like it better toasted or not toasted. I think I like it best toasted, but it makes some really good sandwiches. Very good, yummy bread. Let me know if you make it, if you make any tweaks. Let me know if you use the dough enhancer and how you like that. I will look it up and put a link to Amazon because I've never tried it before and I just need to research it myself. But until next time, I hope you enjoy making bread. I'm glad that you came along with me to make bread this time. It turned out really well. So let me know in the comments how it went for you. Until next time, stay well, be safe, and may God bless you.